Welcome to Wistoria, a land where magic reigns supreme. And the most prestigious place to hone this craft is at the Rigarden Magical Academy, an institution renowned for cultivating the greatest mages in the land, the Magia Vander. There are those who are unable to wield magic, and one such person is a young man named Will Surfort. Mocked by both the faculty and fellow students alike, in time, he will one day come to be recognized as the Sword. We find ourselves in Will's classroom, where he's asked to cast a simple spell in front of his fellow students by Professor Edward Surfance. Unable to accomplish the task, most of the class laugh at him. And in an effort to display his superiority over Will, his biggest bully named Scion Ulster launches a fire spell at the item. With the lessons over, Will is confronted and mocked in the hallway by Scion and his cronies. We are then introduced to Colette, a powerful earth mage and one of his closest allies. She confronts Scion, calling him a bully as she aggressively defends her friend. With the three stooges gone, Will and Colette have a conversation about the foundation of this world. Centuries ago, beings from the sky attacked this world. In a desperate effort to defeat them, 5 great wizards known as the first Magia Vanders repelled them and constructed a magical seal over the sky. And to ensure that the seal remained intact, successive Magia Vanders have preserved the shield, thus protecting their world. We get a flashback to Will's youth where we see him with his childhood friend named Elfaria Albus Serfort, as the two kids make a promise to one another to ascend the tower together. Later on, in an effort to acquire the necessary credits for graduation, we see Will desperately trying to convince his personal tutor, Professor Werkner Norgram, to provide him with the information about a dungeon monster. And when Werkner eventually agrees to Will's request, we see Scion eavesdropping on their conversation. Upon entering the dungeon in an attempt to sabotage Will, the fire mage and his friends find themselves before an unexpected monster. A sentinel makes quick work of his cronies, and as Scion desperately launches useless firebolts at it, Will hears his cries. The young man is surprised to find his bully here, and just for a moment, he ponders whether or not to help someone who has caused him so much heartache. However, memories of his promise to Elfaria pour in, and so Will comes to Scion's aid. Scion watches in awe as someone who he thought of as inferior decimates the monster with agility, speed, strength, and pure bravery. And as Will walks towards Scion after the battle is won, he offers his hand to the mage. However, rather than thanks, Scion glares up at him in rage. Upon his return to the academy, Will is awarded 10 credits for defeating the monster, thus allowing him to meet the threshold required to advance. And as the episode comes to a close, Will looks up at the Magia Vander Tower, and within it, we see Elfaria looking back at him. We continue with a flashback to 5 years earlier where we see a miserable-looking Will being introduced to Headmistress Cauldron. With Werkner skeptical about allowing a magicless boy to join the school, Cauldron decides to enlighten him by testing Will. She provides the boy with a knife and then unleashes powerful magics around him. The tutor watches in awe as Will effortlessly counters every spell around him. And as they leave, Cauldron muses over the thought of a sword that wishes to be a wand. Back in the present, we learn through Professor Werkner that there are only 2 paths to ascending the tower. One is to earn 7,200 credits within the academy, and the other is to create unique magics. Later on, as Will and Colette walk through the halls, we see Scion looking silent and miserable despite being cheered on by his fellow students who believe that he's the one who defeated the sentinel within the dungeon. Elsewhere, we find Edward in a heated conversation with the headmistress. Upon learning that Will was able to defeat the sentinel without magic, the professor cannot abide his presence in the academy. Cauldron nonchalantly offers a proposal. She gives Edward the authority to test Will in any way he sees fit and to promote or expel the young man based on the outcome. And as Will and Colette playfully study, they're interrupted by Professor Edward, who summons the young man to the spell hall. Within the hall, Will is informed that he'll be tested. The rules are simple. The professor will restrict himself to 1 attack, 1 defensive spell, and will not move from his spot. All the young student has to do to succeed is to land a single blow on him. However, if he fails, he'll be kicked out of the academy. And as Werkner and Cauldron observe from her office, the duel begins. Without his weapon, a difficult battle has become impossible, especially when facing a mage who was a hair's breadth away from becoming a Magia Vander. Will's cat, Kiki, runs to his locker where it prompts Colette to bring his sword. Back at the fight, just when all hope seems to be lost, Colette appears and throws Will's sword to him. We learn that long ago, fed up with their mistreatment, the magicless dwarves rose up against the mages, but despite their numbers, they were ruthlessly defeated by a single mage. However, through pure grit, one dwarf surged through to land a strike, thus earning the respect they sought. Back in the present, the duel continues. Will hurls large rocks at the professor, but they're nothing but pebbles upon his shield. Realizing that he'll need to attack the weak points of this defense, the young man leaps up towards the ceiling and fearlessly dives downwards with full force, smashing Edward's shield. And with no time to spare, the student swings his sword at his professor. The sword cuts the mage, and as Professor Edward walks out of the hall, he awards the young man 5 credits. Colette rushes to comfort her friend, and as the episode draws to an end, we see Will's roommate, the supremely talented artificer, Rosti Naumann, waiting for his friend to return home. The episode begins with a flashback to the past, where we see Elfaria telling Will that despite what others may think of him, she will always be his greatest supporter. And as she tearfully bids him farewell on her way into the tower, the young man swears that he'll one day join her there. Back in the present, it's the weekend. We find Will engaged in his part-time job as a paperboy, and as the young man glances at the newspaper, we see an article that praises Elfaria's latest creation, as well as her request for Frostwalker ice cores. Upon his arrival back home, Will is welcomed by his roommate Rosti, and after declaring his intention to gather some ice cores, his roommate provides him with magical tools for the job. Much later, within the bustling dungeon, we see multiple students, including Cyan and his friends, hunting the Frostwalkers. And in an effort to find a less congested area, Will heads to the 4th floor. Upon his arrival, he finds a young girl about to be food for a bunch of monsters. The young man quickly intervenes, cutting down the fiends and saving the girl, who later introduces herself as Iris. As they both make their way through the 4th floor, Iris cheerfully tells Will about her love for Elfaria and how she first met the Ice Mage. Turns out that just like today, she was surrounded by monsters, only for her heroine to appear in the nick of time, effortlessly vanquishing all the fiends. As Will listens to Iris's admiration-filled tale, he realizes that there's a powerful monster hidden within a cave ahead. He retrieves the tools that Rosti made for him from his bag and prepares himself for the encounter. A massive monster known as a Frost Rex emerges from the cave, and with next to no time to spare, he grabs Iris, leaping away from the monster's devastating blow. With lethal attacks and an immunity to ice, the magicless young man devises a plan. He runs circles around the monster, using his device to entangle the fiend's body, and when the opportunity presents itself, he lights a fuse, unleashing a powerful blast that shatters the creature. And with that, he collects the large ice core from the shattered remnants. Later on, we watch as Iris makes her way through the corridors of the tower. We find out that her happy-go-lucky nature was a pretense. Her voice changes as she lets down her hair, pushing open the doors to the halls of the Magia Vander. Iris kneels before 4 of the 5 great wizards. We're introduced to Cariot Insidia Wiseman of Fire, Zeo Thorzeus Reinbolt of Lightning, Eleanor Jos Alf the Elf of Fairy Magic, and of course, Elfaria Albus Surfort of Ice. And once their business is concluded, all except Elfaria leave. Iris gives her report to her master, stating that Will is as impressive as she stated. And as the episode comes to a close, the Ice Mage declares that she'll forever wait for her childhood friend, as we see Rosti looking on at Will. Following the events of Will's test, we find ourselves within the academy once more, where the students are engaged in a test to improve their scores. We're introduced to the big achievers among the students, as they fight against golems in order to advance past the threshold of 7,200 points. We see Colette with 7,340 points, Cyan with 9,889 points, and then the big 3. Lihanna Owenzaus with 10,100, Wignall Lindor with 10,075, and Julius Reinberg with 10,048 points. After his unsuccessful attempt at tackling the golem without a weapon, Will currently has a failing score of 5,405 points. Later on, as the dejected young man and his friend share a meal, we learn about the upcoming Grand Magic Festival, an event that occurs every 2 years where the students showcase their abilities to scouts from the tower. Those who excel at the festival are scooped up by the various factions in attendance, and so she encourages her friend to not lose hope as he may still have an opportunity to advance. However, recalling his past experiences during the last festival where the crowd were unimpressed by a magicless contestant, the young man is reluctant to enter. A while later, as the two friends store their items, Colette notices a suspicious barrier around one of the lockers which she breaks, revealing a hidden stairway. And as the curious pair make their way down, they stumble upon an underground gambling den where students place bets on who will dominate at the upcoming festival. To their surprise, they even find Scion and his cronies there. And because they can't help but wax lyrical about their friend, we learn that the odds of victory are somewhat evenly split between the Fire Mage and the Big Three students. That evening, we find Will in his second part-time job as a waiter within Gina's Tavern, a dwarven-run diner filled with camaraderie and the good cheer of the dwarves. And as the evening continues, the good cheer is turned sour by the sudden arrival of Julius Reinberg and his cronies. With a distinct lack of respect for the dwarves, the three dingleberries are rude and belligerent. Will can stomach no more of this, and so the young man confronts the trio, asking them to leave the premises. But Julius continues to mock all within the tavern. And as his cronies approach Will, the young man grabs them by their collars and smashes their bodies to the ground, instantly knocking both out. Seeing this as an affront to his superiority, the Ice Mage unleashes frost magic throughout the tavern. However, Will evades all his attacks while remaining utterly focused on his enemy. We curiously see the artificer Rosti holding a wand and seemingly prepared to use it. Realizing that he cannot break Will's resolve, the narcissistic mage challenges Will to participate within the Grand Festival, where he hopes to showcase his superiority and break Will's spirit in front of everyone. And as the episode concludes, Will accepts his challenge without hesitation. With fanfare aplenty, we begin with the grandiose opening of the Magic Festival held within the glorious stadium of the city's capital. With fireworks, scouts from the tower, and even dragon riders, combatants, and spectators alike enthusiastically prepare for the great spectacle. In an effort to have a team of 3 that meet the required combined score of 21,000 credits, Colette attempted to recruit Scion, and to their surprise, the Fire Mage accepted. And as the trio prepare themselves, the ceremonies begin in earnest as mages atop the stadium release spectacular magics to begin the festival. We see the gregarious announcer named Maius, along with guest commentator Professor Edward, kick off the festival by explaining the rules of the contest. The teams must navigate their way through various biomes that include volcanoes, marshlands, badlands, grasslands, and the woodlands, with each area containing traps and dangerous obstacles that the groups must conquer. And the first team to get through these obstacles, reach the stadium, and claim the crown will be the winners. With all teams present, the contest begins in earnest. Facing innumerable traps, each team handles the obstacles in their own way. We see Will and his team before a sea of golems, and as many among the spectators mock the magicless student, they watch as the young man fearlessly leaps into the fray. Colette creates a magical earth gauntlet that materializes on the young man's fist, and with irrepressible power, Will plunges into the fiends, smashing his way through them as his group moves with haste to the next location, leaving the spectators shocked and in awe. And as the trio effortlessly cut through the different locations, we see other groups proceed with varying levels of success. With his gauntlet now transformed into a sword, Will and his group reach the Badlands, only to be confronted by a multitude of dark magic traps. The young man cuts around the traps, sending them into a spin, causing them to face each other and destroy themselves. But despite their somewhat effortless progress, Scion remains passive and seemingly lost in thought. Upon reaching the penultimate area, the group is confronted by a clone of Julius, and as Will prepares to confront the Ice Mage, he's suddenly attacked by Scion, who launches an extremely powerful fire blast that decimates the surrounding area, sending shockwaves that are even felt at the stadium. Though Will tries to appeal to Scion's common sense, the Fire Mage is lost to his rage. Determined to restore his pride, and without care for his future prospects, he releases yet another attack. Screaming at her teammates to stop this madness, Colette attempts to intervene, but her path is blocked by Julius, who she must now face alone. And as the episode comes to an end, while Colette faces off against Julius, we watch as Will and Scion prepare for combat. We continue with a flashback to the past where we uncover the origins of Cyan's animosity towards Will. Upon joining the academy, the magicless student was bullied by most of his fellow students. However, there were a few who offered their support to him, and surprisingly, one such person was the young Cyan. The little fire mage burns off the note that was mockingly stuck to Will's back. And when little Cyan meets up with the magicless boy, in his own way, he offered to help and protect him. However, lost in thought and utterly dejected about the possibility of never seeing Elfaria again, the magicless boy offered nothing but a vacant stare. And so falsely believing that Will saw himself as superior, the seeds of hatred were sown within Cyan. In the present, the confrontation between the two continues with Cyan urging Will to stop defending and attack him with everything he's got. Back in the arena, the exuberant Myas excites the bewildered crowd by commentating on the sudden conflict between teammates. And as the crowd is engrossed in the spectacle of it all, we see the cutesy version of Iris as she cheers Will on. She even gets invited to take a seat beside Rosti. Meanwhile, the contest rages on. We see Colette as she battles Julius. Then on to Wignall and his group, who effortlessly dispatch another one of Julius's clones as though it were nothing more than a minor distraction. Back to the fight between teammates, Cyan summons a flaming falcon and launches it at his opponent, but with the use of Colette's Earth Gauntlet, Will is able to neutralize the attack. And as the Fire Mage prepares his next attack, he once again remembers Will's perceived slight against him. Realizing that Cyan will not let this go, Will resolves to face him head-on. A smile appears upon the Fire Mage's face as at last his enemy has acknowledged him. He launches yet another flaming falcon at Will. And even as the magicless boy manages to evade it, Cyan is able to change its direction and steer it back towards Will. And as Will launches himself at Cyan and the mage's falcon is about to detonate upon him, an immense earth barrier is thrust up from the ground, separating the two. They look up to find a somewhat scantily clad Colette sternly admonishing them for fighting one another. And as she lectures them, Cyan is embarrassed as he pretends to look away from the Earth Mage's boobas. Will eventually offers his jacket to Colette, and upon promising Cyan to one day resume their duel, he rushes towards the stadium to confront Julius. Back at the arena, the crowd cheers at the arrival of Julius and his group. However, they are immediately sent into a raucous frenzy as Will surprisingly leaps into the stadium. And as the episode comes to its climactic close, the two students prepare to face off against one another. The episode begins within the Mercedes Callis Tower, aka the Magia Vander Tower, where we see Elfaria being admonished by her assistant. Turns out that though she may be one of the strongest Magia Vanders in history, the Ice Mage is somewhat lazy. Her assistant Sarissa urges her to seriously consider selecting a successor, and through this we learn that the frontrunner for this position is Julius Reinberg. However, the Magia Vander holds her cards close to her chest as she offers a non-committal response. Back at the arena, the confrontation between Will and Julius begins to the rapturous cheers of the crowd. Julius reveals multiple clones that are seemingly independent and are even able to explode, trapping Will within an ice prison in their wake. And as all, including Rosti, wonder how Julius was able to replicate one of Elfaria's 12 secret ice magic spells, the obnoxious mage claims that not only will he rise above Elfaria, he has the audacity to accuse the Magia Vander of being a fraud. This is an insult that Will cannot suffer, and so he smashes out of the ice and launches himself at Julius. And as the mage revels in his success, he will soon realize that his celebrations are premature. The Ice Mage launches multiple attacks at him. However, not only is Will able to evade them, he also takes the opportunity to wipe out Julius's teammates, thus making it a one-on-one battle. Will taunts Julius, stating that he's only able to emulate one of Elfaria's spells with the aid of his teammates, and as such, he is the fraud. The statement enrages the Ice Mage, who launches desperate attacks that are effortlessly swatted away by the magicless boy. And as he questions how this is happening, we get a quick flashback to the past, where we see little Will and Elfaria playing. Turns out that Elfaria was a little terror who playfully bullied her friend with various experimental spells. As such, dealing with Julius's pitiful copy of a true Ice Mage's spells is nothing but child's play to him. Julius is beside himself with rage, and so launches a bombardment of ice bolts at Will. But the magicless boy cuts through them all, and standing before Julius, he punches the annoying little shit in the face, sending him flying through the air and smashing into the walls. And as the crowd erupts with rapturous applause at Will's victory, Wignall appears before the crown. The cheeky mage grabs hold of the prize, and as a result, becomes the winner of the contest. Back in the tower, much to the vexation of her assistant, Elfaria reveals that she has no interest in a successor, but what she seeks is a sword by her side. And as the episode comes to a close, we see the crowd enthusiastically cheer for the magicless boy. And so, even though he didn't win the festival, Will accepts that he has finally won the respect and admiration of the students. We find Will engaged in celebrations within Gina's tavern, as his tutor and friends celebrate his achievements. Though he didn't win the festival, his victory over Julius fills them with great cheer. And as a result of his loss, we find the ice mage washing dishes in the tavern's kitchen. Worried about how the students might treat Will, Colette seeks Werkner's advice. However, the professor cryptically assures her that the students will indeed treat her friend differently. The following day, back at the academy, as the two friends walk through the halls, Will is called upon by a group of students. They are both surprised to discover that the students, impressed by Will's show in the festival, wish to recruit him to their teams for the upcoming Praxis Dungeon event. And as a recruitment war is sparked within the halls, Colette blocks their path, admonishing them for treating her friend so poorly for the longest time. And as she turns to Will, believing that he'll be upset, it turns out that the young man is extremely happy about this new turn of events. And as they all try to schedule meetings with Will, Colette, somewhat jealous, blocks them all, claiming, to Will's surprise, that he'll be unable to attend as they'll be going on a date the following day. Later on that evening, back at her room in the girls' dormitory, we find Colette embarrassed by her boldness at securing a date with Will as she seeks the advice of her roommate. And elsewhere, we watch as Rosti seems to interrogate his friend about his upcoming rendezvous with the Earth Mage. The following day, as Colette nervously waits, her date appears. And as Will apologizes for his tardiness and compliments her on her outfit, Rosti seems to materialize out of nowhere. The artificer has taken it upon himself to be a third wheel, and as he walks off with his friend, he locks hands with Will, teasing Colette as she looks on in shock. Later on, she asks Will if Rosti is secretly a girl, but the young man assures her that his roommate is certainly a boy, as he's seen the artificer's dongler while they showered. And so we consider why Rosti, who is neither a girl nor gay, operates like a fridge guarding the snacks. While the love triangle unfolds, Will is confronted by Lihanna, who invites him to a meeting. And upon arriving at the secret location, he's surprised to find not only Cyan, but the other big three students there. Lihanna unveils her plan to have all present form a team for the upcoming Praxis Dungeon Raid event. And with the toss of a coin into a goblet to signal their agreement, an elite squad is formed. A few days later, we learn the particulars of the event through one of Professor Werkner's lectures. He informs the students that during this event, floors 7 to 10 of the dungeon will be temporarily unlocked. And though the students will face greater dangers, it'll be their best chance to achieve 1,000 or more points in a single event. Almost 2 weeks later, the day of the Praxis event has come. Colette injects herself into the elite group, determined not to leave her friend alone with strangers. And as the episode comes to an end, we watch as the various students prepare for an event that some will not return from. The episode begins within the tower, where we see Cariot Insidia being brought up to speed about the current status of the Praxia event. He asks his subordinate about the whereabouts of the leader of the Magia Vanders, and when told that the Mage of Light is still on a mission, Cariot cryptically remarks that the Sky Shield will not hold out for much longer. Back at the Praxia event, with the aid of Wignall's wind spells, the elite group proceeds with haste through the dungeon. They soon find themselves before a large group of monsters, and as Will prepares to engage them, Lihanna effortlessly decimates their foes. This behavior continues as they progress. As with each encounter, one of the big four annihilates all foes before them. It's a less than subtle statement to Will, as they aim to show him that their gifted use of magic is far superior to his skills with the sword. However, Lihanna assures the group that the magicless boy will eventually show them why she selected him. Further into the dungeon they go, and upon deciding to rest, Wignall creates fire illusion magic to prevent any monsters from attacking them. When Will attempts to hand over some food to Wignall, we learn that the elves believe themselves to be far superior to every other race. So much so that he refuses to touch someone who he sees as inferior, even by mistake. Elsewhere within the dungeon, we're introduced to the Headless and his companion. And as one discards the heads of humans, we learn that the extremely powerful pair have ended the lives of all students and teachers they've come across. Back to the elite group, they proceed to the 10th floor, but their confidence is shattered upon realizing that the powerful threat they were after has already been brutally killed. With a search spell immediately cast, the group find themselves before a far more powerful foe. Flames, ice, lightning, illusion magics are sent forth. But before a single spell leaves their wands, the monster shatters the earth beneath their feet, sending them plunging downwards to the 11th floor. Upon landing, we learn that the group has been separated. We see Will and Wignall, then Cyan and Julius, and finally Colette and Liana, and as Will tries to protect his unconscious teammate against an attack from a mighty serpent, we get a flashback to the elf's past where we learn that Wignall was seen as a failure among his people, especially when compared to his far more talented sibling. Elsewhere, the base camp is in shambles. With dead students, teachers, and monsters alike, it's a scene of chaos. We watch Will and Wignall make their way out of their predicament, only to find themselves confronted by pig-like monsters named Gergesa. The elf uses his illusionary magic to confront them, only to learn that as the creatures cannot see, his magic is useless against them. And as Wignall screams out in terror, ready to meet his maker, a sword is hurled at the beasts, followed by a precise and powerful strike that cuts them asunder. And as the humbled elf sits upon the floor, he confesses to Will that among his people, he too is seen as inferior. We continue with a short trip to the past, where we see Wignall diligently working on his illusion spells in solitude. And impressive though his magic may be, it's still not enough. Elsewhere, as Will and Wignall gather themselves after their encounter with the pig monsters, the elf shares his past. We get a quick flashback where we learn that just like Will, Wignall had a dear childhood friend named Eleanor. Her talent was recognized by all until she became one of the Magia Vander. The elf strove to improve himself in hopes of joining her one day, only to be found lacking and then cruelly dubbed the laggard by all around him. Will assures Wignall that he's a great mage, and for as long as they are in this predicament, he'll be the elf's shield. And as the two make their way through the perilous dungeon, the injured Wignall watches in awe as Will, seemingly tireless, keeps to his word as he cuts through all the foes they encounter. Their speedy progress is soon halted by fire-resistant monsters named Balkars. Will leaps into the fray as the elf launches illusionary spells from the rear. However, his magic falters, and as the magic-less boy uses his sword to block the creature's attacks, he shouts out to the dejected mage, telling Wignall that he believes in him. The simple words of encouragement allows the mage to break through his self-doubt and strengthen his resolve. With Eleanor's reassuring smile in his heart, Wignall rises to his feet, and with a wave of his wand, unleashes a truly magnificent illusionary spell that turns the environment into woodlands, defeating all monsters before them. Impressed by the display, Will happily turns around, only to find the once arrogant elf kneeling before him. Wignall apologizes for his earlier rudeness and contempt towards Will. The magicless boy also reveals that he used to watch the elf practice diligently at the academy, and as such, he too has great respect for the mage. And as the two shake hands, a new friendship is born. Later on, the pair eventually reunite with Julius and Cyan. But elsewhere, we watch as Liana and Colette continue to make their way through the dungeon. Unfortunately, the ladies have the misfortune of bumping into the two villainous mages named Mars and Headless. Colette bravely asks them to declare their intentions, and Headless, after crushing his own head, reveals their intent to destroy the false sky that protects their world. And as he releases a spell to remove their heads, a counterspell is launched from above as the lads appear just in time. They were able to find the girls quickly thanks to the rocks that Colette left along the way. Excited by the prospect of killing all the students before him, Headless prepares to attack them, only to be nonchalantly dragged away by Mars as they make their exit. However, the student's relief is short-lived as Headless casts a spell that summons a truly fearful creature. And as the episode comes to a close, the students watch in horror as the Grand Duke lands before them. We continue in earnest as Will explains how monsters are graded and the gravity of the situation they face. Within the academy, for every 1 point a monster is worth, a student will require 1,000 credits to be able to defeat it. The foe before them has been measured at 270 points, and so they wisely choose to run. As they consider their options of either waiting for rescue or carving a path through this predicament, Will suggests that they fight. Julian is quick to accost the magicless boy for suggesting something that is nigh on suicidal. But as he argues, Wignall offers his unconditional support to Will, followed by Colette, Scion, and at the behest of the elf, Lihana too. In an effort to get Julius aboard, Will offers to teach him a trick to one of Elfaria's secret techniques. Later on, as the group spreads out above ledges and the Grand Duke lands in the center of this arena, their encounter begins. Julius begins casting a powerful spell at the Duke, only to be quickly cut in half by the creature. However, it's but one of many of his clones that chant in unison. As one copy dies, another continues the spell in its place. And as the monster turns its attention towards him, every other member of the group casts low-level spells to distract it. But nothing is able to penetrate the beast's armor until eventually, the Ice Mage unleashes his powerful spell. The dust settles with not even a scratch upon the Grand Duke. However, the group had planned for this. In comes Lihana with a lightning-fast attack that seeks to pierce the monster's heart, but its shield blocks her thrust. Will rushes in to save her from multiple projectiles, calling out to Kiki, who bellows out a shield that blocks most of the damage, but the projectiles still shatter their defenses. Elsewhere, we see Edward and Werkner, who, with the aid of a crystal ball connected to the crystal on Kiki's head, hastily ride a dragon towards the group's location. As the students dejectedly look on at the Duke, Lihana and Wignall rush towards it in an effort to sacrifice themselves for the group's escape, but the creature effortlessly swats away their attacks. With the aid of Scion, Will is brought to his senses and soon enough grabs hold of his sword and launches himself at the Grand Duke. And as he leaps at the Duke, Colette releases a powerful spell before him. The young man plunges through it, grasping a sword in his hand and slashing at the monster. Scion appears, riding a flaming falcon as he unleashes a powerful spell at the monster, but all their attacks are for naught as the Duke lives on. A mysterious crystal appears before Will, and upon holding it, we see Rosti, then Elfaria, and then a scene from the past showing a mother proclaiming that her newborn child shall one day unite wand and sword. Will shouts out to Scion to launch a fire spell at him, and when the fire reaches him, his sword consumes the flames. We then watch as he leaps towards the monster, unleashing a rare and powerful attack known as Ignis Vice that cuts the Grand Duke asunder. We begin with all group members looking on in awe as the Grand Duke disintegrates before them while Will holds the flaming sword imbued by Ignis Vice. However, their relief is short-lived, as upon the fall of the Grand Duke, all monsters within the dungeon now converge towards their location. The students have no strength, stamina, or spell power left, and as the innumerable multitude of monsters descend upon them, a bell tolls as a great staff is struck upon the ground. A deep voice bellows out the ultimate spell named Loi Illusa, causing all monsters to be held in place as bolts of light rain upon them, destroying all the fiends. The students look up to find a group of warriors standing aloft, and in front of them all stands the king of the Magia Vander and the strongest mage in all the land. The Wizard of Light, Aaron Masterius Old King, stands before them. Old King commends all the students for their determination and bravery. All within the chamber, including Werkner and Edward, kneel before the mighty mage. However, as all look upon the king, Will's eyes are fixated on another among them who seems somewhat out of place among the mages. As the man walks towards Will with a smile on his face, he curiously remarks that the sword still lives, and as he stands before Will, introduces himself simply as Finn. A few days have passed since the occurrence at the Praxis event. We watch as a mass funeral is held for the deceased professors, all 11 of whom sacrificed their lives to ensure that not a single student lost theirs. Much later, we watch the students of the elite group as they solemnly recover within the academy's infirmary. And as they mourn the loss of their late professors, they also reflect on the identity of the two villains they met. The topic of Finn arises. We learn that there's a tribe called the Finn tribe. Not a single one of them can wield magic. However, their extensive knowledge of dungeons has led to the mages forming a contract with them. For without the tribe, exploration within the deep levels of a dungeon would not be possible. Elsewhere, we find Finn in Headmistress Cauldron's office as the diminutive man hands over a broken weapon to her, which she tucks away. He then casually leaps onto her table, and as he questions why Cauldron kept the existence of a sword from him, she explains that Will's wish is to rise through the tower and become a Magia Vander who stands beside Elfaria. The tension is palpable as these two powerful beings stare at each other until Finn eventually relents. And as he walks away, he states that he'll let Cauldron keep hold of the sword for now. Elsewhere, we find the magicless boy practicing his sword swings despite not having fully recovered. Cyan then takes the opportunity to challenge Will to yet another duel, leading to a chaotic and somewhat friendly encounter between members of the elite group. And as our tale comes to an end, we watch all the Magia Vander as they ponder about what wonders the future holds for the world of Wistoria. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please smash that like and subscribe button to help the channel grow. And I'll see you all on the next anime adventure.